Hey everybody, AJ here.
And Richard. We're just adding this little part before the podcast, before we get to talking about the Millennium franchise. If you're not aware, our hometown of Christchurch and the whole country of New Zealand is currently reeling in the aftermath of this unspeakable tragedy. There was a mass shooting at a mosque in Christchurch. This isn't the kind of thing that ever happens in New Zealand, so it's one of those things that's sort of really hard to process when it happens in your hometown. AJ and I are both from Christchurch. AJ,
I live in Christchtchurch.
Currently there at the moment.
So I live about a 5-minute drive from where the one of the shootings happened.
Yeah, and in fact, our live episode we recorded, the High School Musical one that was released at the start of this year, is like 1.5 kilometers, less than a mile away from where the main shooting took place. And it might seem weird to have a movie-based comedy-leaning podcast sort of have this at the start, but it didn't feel right not to address it when, as I say, we are both from Christchurch, and a lot of our fan base is in Christchurch, and we're both safe. We're both all our loved ones are safe, and everyone in the Colbosch family is safe, and we hope that you can say the same about your family and your loved ones and yourself. I do want to say as well, Colbosch is obviously a very small operation. We don't make a lot of money through it, but we did want to sort of help out in whatever way we can, and so we have a Patreon that we get some money each month, and we've decided that for the month of March, our income, we're going to donate that to whatever. There's give a little pages and charities that are popping up, but just when it becomes clear, what the sort of what the best way to support these people, these victims, is, then we're going to donate this month's income to that. And if you want to sign up to our Patreon and to support the victims and get an extra podcast or two on the side, you can sign up and then pay at the end of March and then cancel your subscription, whatever.
Yeah. This isn't us advertising for our Patreon. This is our way of fundraising.
But yeah, so we recorded this episode before recording this little introduction because we didn't want this sort of energy to follow on into our record. So let's put this kind of all to the side for now. Obviously, we can't ignore it. In New Zealand, the country we live in is a different place from now. But
we thought about not releasing anything this week. We thought about going dark for a week. But if all we can do and give the world is a silly 2-hour podcast of us shooting the shit about movies, then we were like, we should still do that,
because if we don't continue to live our lives and create what we would call comedy or humor, if we stop doing that because of the actions of these people, then the hate wins. And that's not the way the world should be. That's not what we should take from this. It's, you need to look at all the messages of support and love that came out of this, and that's what we're about here at Colbosch. We're about love.
Yeah. So please enjoy our stupid little podcast, I guess.
Yeah, and we're sorry for being downers at the start of this, but we promise there's no more of that. Although I should say actually that if you're familiar with the Millennium franchise, you'll know that this episode will probably actually deal with some pretty heavy themes.
That's true. That was an unfortunate, result of our randomly choosing franchises. Design.
Yeah. So obviously, I guess I would say trigger warning.
Content warning.
Content warning. This contains themes of sexual assault. And again, I'm sorry that I had to say that, but it felt like the right thing to do. So let's take it away with the song Glitched Out, which is the name of our theme song, if you didn't know that.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, guys. We love you all.
Thank you. We love you. And
please enjoy this episode. Hello, everybody. My name is AJ.
And I'm Richard.
There he is. He's over there. I can see you. This is film franchise Fortnights on the Cult Popture podcast. This is a podcast where every fortnight we bring you a discussion, a review, a dissection of a different film franchise. If you're joining us for the first time, what are some episodes we can recommend? This one. This will be a good one.
Just keep listening.
Yeah.
Don't turn it off.
And today on the show, we're going to be reviewing, discussing, or dissecting. I'm not going to say "and" because depending on your definitions of all of those words, you may have different feelings about them. But we are going to be talking about the Millennium series, which is a hard franchise to try and advertise that we're watching, because how many people do you think know it's called the Millennium series?
Everyone.
You reckon everyone? I wouldn't know if I didn't look at the Wikipedia page.
I guess this is one of those things where I'm just smarter than you.
That's true. That happens frequently.
Yeah.
But I use the word frequently, which is more complicated.
So I don't know what
often.
that word means, sorry.
It means often.
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool.
Do you ever watch Everybody Loves Raymond?
We've talked about this so many times.
And how there was one where the guy, the dad, Frank Boyle, was like, "Make up your mind, America. Is it often or often?" And whenever I heard that joke, I was like, I wonder what that was written as in the script. Because it's all in how he pronounces it. Surprisingly, though, we're not here to talk about
Everybody Loves
Raymond, not this time. But yeah, the Millennium series, or maybe more well known as the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series, or the Dragon Tattoo series, or one of those.
The Dragon Tattoo stories, as it's become, official marketing has called it.
Yeah. The Millennium series is a series of crime thrillers that are almost entirely based off the Swedish novels by the late Stieg Larsson. Am I saying that correctly, to your knowledge?
As far as I'm aware, yes.
Stieg Larsson?
There's a few assumptions on pronunciation I'm going to have to make.
Yeah, that's true. There is going to be a lot of Swedish in this episode from two people who don't even know how to pronounce Swedish, let alone...
I don't know how to pronounce the word Swedish.
Swedish. So the novels that the films are based on, they were all published posthumously, with the first novel coming out in 2005 and his second two coming out in 2006 and 2007 respectively, and he died in 2004. The fourth novel, on which the fifth film that we'll be talking about is based on, was written by David Lagerkrantz.
Lagerkrantz, yeah.
Lagerkrantz.
I'd presume so, yeah.
Yeah, and that was released in 2015. So depending on who
and
you
he's
ask...
still alive. That one wasn't posthumous.
Yeah. Depending on who you ask and what parts of IMDb trivia sections you read, the films span across 2.5 different canons. So there's a trilogy, there's a Swedish trilogy, an American adaptation, not a remake. They're pulling from the same source material, so it's just another adaptation, and then another movie, which some say it's a sequel, some say it's not.
Yeah, it's like a soft reboot.
Yeah,
I guess,
soft reboot is commonly is what it's referred to as. So the movies star Noomi Rapace. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. Do you reckon? We've gone into a lot of detail for not saying what the films are.
What do you mean?
We haven't said the names of the films.
The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I've said that.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know. It seems like to get into starring,
all right.
we
Girl
should
with the
say
Dragon
titles
Tattoo.
first.
The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Girl Who Played with Fire, The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo again, and The Girl on the Spider's Web are the 5 films.
A new Dragon Tattoo story.
That's not written anywhere else but the poster, so I didn't include it. But we can talk about that later on if you like.
I'm sorry I mentioned titles.
So these movies star Noomi Rapace, Michael Nyqvist, Rooney Mara, Daniel Craig, Claire Foy, and Sverrir Gudnason, who all play the same characters.
Sverrir, goodness.
So they play Lisbeth Salander and Mikael Blomqvist in different films. Other well-known actors that I'd heard of who appear in the 2 American films include Christopher Plummer, Stellan Skarsgård, Robin Wright, Lakeith Stanfield, and Stephen Merchant. Anyone else I'm missing?
Oh, that's a pretty good list you got there, mate.
Sweet. All right, here we go. We're cracking into it. Now I'm going to tell you what they're all called. So the first film to be released was called The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That was released in February of 2009 and directed by Niels Arden Oplev. And what do you think that has on Rotten Tomatoes?
I'm going to say mid to high 80s.
Yep, mid to high 80s is exactly it. It's 86.
Nice.
And can you give us like a brief synopsis of what The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is about?
Right, so it's sort of 2 stories that converge. So you've got a journalist called Mikael Blomqvist. I always get confused because he's played by an actor called Michael Nyqvist. And they have they're very similar names, but the late Michael Nyqvist,
true.
Unfortunately, but so he has just lost a libel case for slander, but when it's written, it's called libel, as Spider-Man taught us.
Oh.
But he gets hired by this patriarch, I guess, of the Vanga family.
The corporation, they have a business.
And he says, look, this girl, my family, was killed 40 years ago. She disappeared 40 years ago, his niece, and I want you to find her killer.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, you've got Lisbeth Salander, who is, what's like the word, like a ward of the state kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And she is currently...
She's like cyberpunk goth.
Yeah, she's a computer hacker. She's a cyberpunk. She was the one, she does like background checks because she's so good at hacking into all the systems and finding all the secret information. And eventually Michael finds out about Lisbeth and says, this is the perfect person to assist me in this case. And there's also quite an important scene, a very harrowing scene of sexual assault that happens, and
it kind of informs Lisbeth's character.
Yeah, so
these are very feminist, like strong feminist stories that are sort of about the horrible extremes of misogyny. Like all 5, I would say that's what they're trying to convey, and so there's a lot of hard stuff in these movies.
But basically, I mean, I don't know. Do we spoil what the case?
We'll be talking about spoilers plenty, so just spoil.
Okay, so it turns out that Harriet, the girl that we're missing, is still alive, and everyone's happy.
She escaped her home because her father and brother were abusing her whole life. And her father was a killer of women, and then when she finally managed to stop her father and kill him,
and her brother witnessed it, and it basically just turned him into his father.
Yeah, and so the climax of the film is basically them uncovering that it's one of the unsuspecting members of the Vanger Corporation's little island where they all live and don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So that was followed by The Girl Who Played with Fire in September of 2009.
Mm-hmm.
So the same year. This one was directed by Daniel Alfredson, which is a distinctly non-Swedish sounding name. But there you go. That'll be the only one. Well, I guess until we get to the American
That's the only non-Swedish name we're saying.
Yeah. Daniel Craig. What do you think The Girl Who Played with Fire has on Rotten Tomatoes?
I'm going to say lower than Dragon Tattoo.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess 72.
It's got 70, so very close. And what's this one about, Richard?
So this is when it starts to get quite complicated. So I had seen these movies before.
Yeah.
But the only thing I remembered from the second and third was the name Alexander Zalashenko. Because it's such a fucking cool name. It's so much fun to say. It's so much fun to hear people say. But obviously, it's not a very fun character. So essentially in this one, it's like I guess the main kind of storyline is it's like a cat and mouse game, right? So the Elizabeth's rapist shows up dead, and so obviously that makes Elizabeth a prime suspect. But Elizabeth being pursued by this kind of like Hulk of a man, who's hot on her heels, and then eventually it's revealed that that's actually her brother. And this mysterious Zala is Alexander Zalashenko, who is her father, who we see do we see this at the end of Dragon Tattoo? Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
That she sort of followed him out to his car one day, poured gasoline all over him and lit him on fire, and he survived it. He's now an old man with a cane who's severely burnt and ends up having a fight with Elizabeth, and which ends with a bullet to Elizabeth's head. Yeah. But she survives it.
Yeah.
And she ends up in hospital.
And she kind of... So Niederman is the name of her brother. And what was another? The
hulking person was her brother.
Yeah. And the aftermath of her trying to burn her father was she got sent to foster care, or not foster care, even like an asylum, basically. Which is
why she's now a ward of the state.
Yeah. Cool. All right. And Richard, the next film that came out, was called The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest in November of 2009. Now,
that's a very long title.
Yeah.
The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest in November of 2009.
It is important to note as well that it is hornets plural. So it's hornets apostrophe nest, not hornet. The nest doesn't belong to a hornet. It belongs to several of them.
Yeah.
There's also, it's a metaphorical nest, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's just grammatically correct.
Yeah, I know. It's you don't often see plural ownership, I feel. Not in titles, anyway. What a dumb observation for me to make and think it was good enough to bring up on pod.
Yeah, it was.
So this was also directed by Daniel Alfredson. What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
This is clearly the worst one, and I know it's considered the worst one. And from memory, I don't think it's fresh, but I think because it's like still a foreign film, and it's got that kind of prestige to it. I don't think it's going to be that below fresh. So I'm going to say 56.
54. I think for each of these, you've got two digits off. Well, I guess you said mid-80s for Dragon Tattoo, and it was 86. All right, so what is...
I was thinking 88 in my mind.
Right, there you go. What is Hornet's Nest about, dude? Tell me.
Okay, I am... So Hornet's Nest.
I am desperately trying to recall this film.
So Girl Who Kicks the Hornet's Nest is sort of it's essentially this is when the series becomes very much a two-parter. Like, So yeah, I mean it is a trilogy, but it's very much Dragon Tattoo is kind of one thing that hints at the next chapter, and then Play with Fire and Hornet's Nest are two, halves of the same story.
Yep.
So this begins at the hospital, and she's recovering, but then it turns into the sort of trial of Lisbeth Salander.
Yep. So
essentially,
Zelashenko survives, and he's also in the hospital. And there's like so forgive me because the whole movie I had one burning question that doesn't really get answered. But there's like a syndicate or a secret society that want Lisbeth dead because she knows that Zelashenko is a bad dude. And they kill Zelashenko at the start in the hospital, and then they're trying to kill her the whole movie. But I don't know why. I don't know what their deal that like sect's deal was. I think
maybe it will be explored in a later film, kind of, but not really.
Maybe. And so they basically catch her, and her doctor, who treated her when she was in psychiatric care and growing up, his name is Dr. Talaborian, and he basically is a bad dude. And so she has to prove that she's not a liar. Very, very pertinent to cases of like he said, she said kind of stuff that you get going.
Yeah, but then obviously the bombshell is that she actually has video recording of her being raped by her guardian, I guess is the right word. Yeah. So we end it there with that original Swedish trilogy, and I guess the only other thing I would mention that's of interest is that the second two films were made to be straight-to-TV movies, but because Dragon Tattoo did so well, they released them in cinemas, which is interesting that you'd get three separate films all in the same year, all released in cinemas, and they're all sequels, Sweet. So, a while later, in 2011... ages later. What is that, like 2 years?
Two.
Almost?
You're right. It is 2.
Wow.
The number 2 shows up
Time
again in this podcast.
Flies.
So David Fincher got his hands on it. Now, David Fincher being the one of the best working directors alive, probably. I'd be comfortable sticking my neck out for that statement. He got his hands on it, and he made The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, an American version. What do you think that has on Rotten Tomatoes? Or Rotten Tomatoes?
I wonder, in your script you've written, how that was written.
It wasn't. I could send you a screenshot. I just thought of it on the fly.
Wow. That's insane because it's such a funny joke. I'm going to say... What did the original have?
The first is 86.
I'm going to say 86.
It does. Did you know that?
No.
Did you know that they were the same?
No.
Because I thought that's an interesting piece of trivia, is that they're both ranked the same, or rated the same.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know. Do you want to go over the plot
I
again?
think it's not really it's a lot of American adaptations will add something, or there's you think, oh, maybe there's a famous thing that was left out of the book that was brought back into this or something. It's a very, I mean, I haven't read the book, but it's a very faithful adaptation of
very
the
similar
original.
Very similar to the other Swedish film as well.
Yeah, they don't change the names. They all keep their Swedish sounding names, even though they varies from person to person what kind of accent they speak with.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the actors they cast. Some of them are just he's the the American version of that actor, or British version of that actor.
Yeah. Daniel Craig is Hollywood Michael Nyqvist.
Yeah, and
if Michael Nyqvist didn't look like a real person and he looked a bit more chiseled and handsome, he would be Daniel Craig.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's not really much to say in terms of the plot. It's
the exact same thing.
It's the same.
Sweet. And then in 2018, so the longest gap between films, quite a wide margin since the first 3 were months apart.
Yeah.
we got The Girl in the Spider's Web last year in 2018. Weird watching a film I saw in cinemas a few months ago again for this podcast. Has that ever happened before?
It's the most recent film we've ever done for the podcast, not only in terms of from now, it's the most recently released film we've covered, but I think other than going to the movie specifically for this podcast, it's the most recent one we've had to rewatch, which is going to be... That record's going to be broken very soon.
Yes. I guess another fun way to look at it would be it's a movie that wasn't even beginning to exist when we started the podcast.
Yeah.
But I guess that you could probably say that about a few others, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm sure they didn't think they were doing a fourth Pup Star movie.
They actually had. They had planned we're going to do it. So this was directed by... Fede?
I think it's Fede.
Fede Alvarez, Fede.
Fede.
Fede?
I think it's Fede.
Fede Wap?
Yeah.
Is directed by Fede Alvarez. Before we've called him The Feet.
Yeah. Feed. My feet.
Yeah, so he directed it. And what do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
This is like 40, isn't it?
Yeah, 40%. Yeah. And what is this film about?
So this is really interesting because it's like I said, it's a soft reboot because obviously we didn't get an American version of Play with Fire or Hornet's Nest, but there are elements of those hinted at it, but it's also supposed to be, I guess, a sequel to the American Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and it's just implied, I guess, that the other two happened, but at the same time, it kind of ignores all of that.
In terms of continuity,
just be the first story.
Yeah, in terms of continuity, it's one of the weirdest examples of how to handle the idea of a soft reboot. Because it's it doesn't quite explain everything it would need to if it was a standalone. There's stuff that it assumes you'll know because you know the story, or at least the series. And as I said before, this wasn't based on a Stieg Larsson book. This was based on, what's his name? David Lagerkrantz, his first novel, because he took over from Larsson.
Yeah. Do you mean it was his first in the series, or it was his first novel ever?
It was his first in the series.
Okay. Yeah.
I think he's pretty acclaimed outside of
right,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's it about?
This is... there's a... one of those kind of like Rabbit's Foot in Mission Impossible 3, one of those end of the world kind of MacGuffins. And it's a computer program. The guy who invented it enlists Lisbeth to steal it back, essentially, because it can't be destroyed, it can only be moved. And then Lisbeth ends up wound in this web, of kind of this thing that's bigger than we are, but and also introduces the character of her sister,
who's never been, not even in the novel, apparently.
Yeah.
She is mentioned by name in a Stieg Larsson one, in one of the original three, but never seen. So I guess it's not too bad.
Right.
I think it says she has a twin in one of the
Camilla
Stieg Larsson's one. Yeah.
And she... so she's the anti-Elizabeth. She's got blonde hair and dresses in red.
Oh my god.
And essentially
she's like the head of the Spiders, which is the Spiders,
which is kind of what was referred to as the section, is that right? In Hornet's Nest?
Ah, was it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. And that's so I guess it's the same thing because it's they mention Zalashenko, or they mention her father at least, and you can see on screen that his name is Zalashenko. And also while at the meantime as well, Lisbeth has to take care of the guy who created what's the end of the world technology? Isn't it? It's like Firefall or something.
I don't know.
That.
I can't remember. It's such a generic this is like taking all the uniqueness that is Dragon Tattoo out of.
Yeah. she has to take care of his son after he dies.
Yeah.
And then there's also an American FBI agent played by Lakeith Stanfield who comes to Stockholm to stop her, and they end up teaming up.
Yeah.
Mikhail
shows up as well. It's a very...
And he's younger and arguably more handsome.
Yeah, and it's a very... It's like... This is what it is, so I'm not really making a metaphor here. It's the a series that has been previously crafted by quite creative and auteurs now being handed into more inexperienced storytellers, both in terms of the guy who wrote it and the guy who directed it.
Because I'm pretty sure that The Girl in the Spider's Web, the novel, is kind of considered like an affront to the original trilogy of novels.
Really?
And the movie, I think, because you and I both saw the movie in cinemas.
Yeah.
I went to go see it, I think, opening weekend, and I'd heard it was terrible, but I love the David Fincher version so much.
Yeah.
And to a lesser extent, the original and the sequels. But it is a franchise that I actually care about quite a bit in some ways. But then at the same time, I went to go see this and I was like, this is not as bad as all of the critics are saying. Yeah. Because it kind of got destroyed by critics. And I think Fede Alvarez is a very competent director. But yeah, watching it again, there is a few problems with it, which I think we'll get to more later on. There's one that was like, that showed up for me that I do want to talk about later on, that I was very much like, I didn't think about this enough earlier, but this is actually a massive offense.
Wow. Yeah, it's such a strange movie because it's like one thing we'll talk about as well is that this was the answer to years of people clamoring for another Fincher Dragon Tattoo movie.
Yeah, and like even Rooney Mara, and like everyone involved wanted to do that. Rooney Mara kept her nipple pierced for years because she was like, well, I mean, ear, tongue, nose, I could do those again, but I'm not fucking getting my nipple pierced again.
All right, so what did you think of the series? What was your favourite, and how would you rank them? I need to start changing up how I write that each episode, or else it's going to become a segment.
No, I mean, just lead into it, I reckon.
Okay.
Make it like a little song or like a little rhyme, and you say it the same way every time. Okay, so as I mentioned, the girl, Fincher's version. What are we going to use?
I've called it, Fincher's and the Swedish versions, I guess.
Yeah, okay, sweet. And then just Spider's Web, Hornet's Nest, Play with Fire. Yeah. So, my favourite is David Fincher's version. Mm-hmm. David Fincher's one of my favourite directors. And this is one of those things where, like, for any other director, this would be their masterpiece.
Yeah.
But for Fincher, it's like, this is probably in his top 5.
Yeah.
It's not even definitely in his top 5.
Yeah, I agree.
And but at the same time, I think it's probably one of my favorite. I think it's a perfect film. I think it's so beautifully crafted. And like one thing that David Fincher is like an absolute master of, that I think maybe he doesn't get, I mean, in certain circles he does, but that maybe he doesn't get enough credit for, is that he is like a master of pacing.
Right.
Because especially like, it's super obvious in films like Zodiac and The Social Network that, I mean, these are quite long films, but they fly by. Like, The Social Network is such an easy watch in a lot of ways because you can put it on and next thing you know, it's finished. But so much happens, and it's a really hard thing to explain to someone who's not, like, you know, into filmy kind of terms or storytelling kind of terms. And even to someone who is, it's still a hard thing to really identify. But, I mean, if a film never feels like it's a chore watching it, or it never goes, you're never struggling to keep up with it.
Yeah.
That's good pacing. And also that's one of the, like, things that's, how do you define good directing? It's those kind of things.
Okay. It's interesting you should bring up pacing specifically, because I think the ending of this film drags. Like, I enjoy it, but I remember thinking that because I saw this in theaters, and I've only seen it twice, like then and for this podcast.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking when I walked out of it, that was so good until it just wouldn't end. And because I think you can read some stuff online. There's a great lessons from the screenplay video on it about how the story is split up into a 5-act structure, which I won't go into too much. But basically, that's more typical of a cop drama than a movie.
Yeah, it's also like it's very international as well.
Yeah, and so both Lisbeth and Mikhail have like background stories that sort of like play out while they're trying to solve this mystery. And in any other movie, it's correct, right? You solve the mystery and then you wrap up the character arcs. If you can do them both at the same time, you can. But they take just as much time to wrap up the character arcs as they do to solve the mystery. And so you get this really exciting like climax, and then maybe the last half an hour of the film is very, I want to use the word like bureaucratic in comparison. Like it's all about like doing, laundering money and basically clearing Mikhail's name since he was going to jail because of the libel stuff. And that's, I love it too. I think in general, I'd say Fincher's Dragon Tattoo is by far the best film. Like by far the best film.
Yeah, 100%. Like
watched, but,
I can understand why people want to leap to defending an original.
Yeah.
And especially a foreign language film.
Yeah.
But Fincher's version is better in every single way.
Well, it's not because it's not an American remake. It's a David Fincher film. Like it's not the case of it being the American version. It's like this is David Fincher, regardless of his what country he's from. This is a David Fincher film. We're not talking in comparison. The Swedish ones look like made for TV movies.
Yeah.
So
we're not talking about this or this. We're talking about this.
Yeah.
Just an obscure SpongeBob reference there in the middle of your Millennium Trilogy podcast.
There we go. All right. So what?
But I do just want to say before we move on, my ranking.
I was about to move you into it, so we're on the same
all right.
page.
Okay. Well, you can't because I'm going to do it myself.
Okay.
Okay. So
do
it. Now I don't want to. So my ranking: Girl with Dragon Tattoo, 2011, David Fincher's version. Firmly at number 1.
Yeah.
Then I would go the original Swedish version because I still think it has the best story.
It's so good as well.
The storyline of Dragon Tattoo is by far the best.
Yeah.
Then I would probably actually go The Girl in the Spider's Web. And again, I enjoy this a lot more than other people did, and when it comes to The Spider's Web, it is definitely a soft reboot. It serves a different purpose than the other ones, I think. This kind of wants to be a female James Bourne.
Yeah.
Jason Bourne, sorry. James Bourne from Busted. It wants to be the one of the 3 singers of Busted.
Right, interesting. I did not pick up on that reading when I watched it.
It wants to be, like a female Jason Bourne or like, begin. It's very much feels like the leaping off point of a new franchise, and the characters kind of don't feel like themselves in a lot of ways. And but having said that, I think it's still quite a watchable and enjoyable film, and it does what it's trying to do quite well.
Yeah,
and then I would go Play with Fire, Hornet's Nest.
Yeah.
Hornet's Nest's my biggest gripe with it is that Lisbeth and Mikhail don't interact until literally the last scene of the film, like the last minute of the film, essentially, which is they have such great chemistry. And in the first 4 films, they don't interact in the first hour.
Yeah.
And then the Spider's Web fucks it up and they interact 29 minutes into the film. And I was so pissed off because I was like, this would have been my fun bit of trivia.
It is a really creative writing exercise to keep your characters apart.
However, they're actually not in the same room in Spider's Web until after the hour point. They interact in elevators on opposite buildings and they talk on the phone. So they are on screen together at some parts because of the way it's shot. However, they actually aren't in the same room in the first hour of any of these films, which is quite an interesting fun fact.
Yeah, I would more or less agree with your ranking. Finch's tattoo is Finch's the girl with the dragon with the Fincher tattoo. It's like I loved Fight Club. Yeah,
Tyler Durden is my idol. I completely missed the point of that film.
Finch's dragon tattoo is by far the best. Yeah, the original dragon tattoo, which because I watched the original one first this time, and that was the only other one I'd seen before. After I watched Finch's version in 2011, I watched the Swedish version, and I'd seen Spider's Web as well. But yeah, the original dragon tattoo, or the Swedish one, it's so good still. You know, like watching it, I was like,
yeah.
This story is my favorite part, one of my favorite pieces of storytelling, and I think they do it better in the Swedish one than Finch's one, is when he has like a photo of Harriet at this parade from the day she disappeared, and he finds the negatives of the photo and enlarges the alternate versions that weren't published, because it's for a magazine or whatever, and he slides through them, and you see her face slowly turn and see someone, and her face drops and she leaves in these photos. I was like, that's so fucking good. That's such a good visual storytelling. It's captivating, and it's a murder mystery, right? And now we have this bomb mystery drops. Yeah, it's so good. So I thought that was just handled a bit better in the Swedish one than the Fincher one, where it goes past a bit faster. And also they also find out someone's taking a photo in the photo where she sees someone, so he has to track down the opposite photo and find. It's excellent. It's really good, murder mystery.
I do love a good murder mystery / detective story.
Yeah, exactly. Then I would go second place. I've kind of tied Played with Fire and Spider's Web. I think Played with Fire is truer to Stieg Larsson's
the original
vision.
Film,
obviously, because he wrote it. But Spider's Web is a hell of a lot easier to watch because it's simple. And
it's in the language that we speak.
Yeah. No, but even just the plot's pretty complicated in Played with Fire.
Yeah.
And then Hornet's Nest is dead last. I agree. So I've got a couple of things. I've got one kind of example of what a good way to explain why Fincher's version is superior in my eyes. So Lisbeth, as we said, she gets raped by her new guardian, and the reason she has a new guardian is because her old guardian has had a stroke, so she needs to be given to a she's a ward of the state. She's given to a new guardian, and in the Swedish version, it's like your guardian's had a stroke. And in the Fincher version, it's like she goes to his house and she sees him lying on the floor, and she helps him up and coddles him and looks after him and stuff. And do we even see him in the Swedish one?
I don't think so, no.
So that's just an example, right, of showing that this is someone she cares about, and a place in the world she's found that she's got a guardian who trusts her and lets her have her own money, and then this new guy is the polar opposite, who's not only an asshole but then also assaults her. Yeah, and so that's an example of what I would call better storytelling, because we establish she's got a good relationship with her original guardian before we find out she's got a new one.
Yeah.
But that being said, there are a few other things I prefer about the Swedish version. As I said before, I do think it wraps up at least quicker or more efficient than Fincher's version. I don't know. Maybe you disagree. It sounds like you disagree, but
no. I mean, when I say it's better in every way, I mean,
except the ending.
No, I mean, it's not I don't know. I don't really count that as a way, you know. I guess it's it's better shot, it's better crafted, it's better acted.
Absolutely. So it just ends quicker, I guess, which is nice coming out of the climax. And I also really love in the Swedish version that when Lisbeth chases Martin, who's revealed to be the bad guy, he drives off a bridge and his car topples over and sets alight. And in the Swedish version, she walks up to him and watches him burn alive, and she can save him, but she chooses not to. And that's a very extreme and powerful view. When I watched it, I was like, well, this is what it's like when Lisbeth's rapist is, has all the power. The power dynamic shifts.
Yeah, essentially, because the movie is about, and the whole franchise really is about the power dynamic between women and the men who abuse them.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is the tables being turned.
Yeah, and it's really good. Whereas in Finch's version, he drives off the bridge or something. He doesn't. He like skids out of control and crashes. And then as she's walking towards the car blows up. And I wonder why they did that. I wonder if it was like a morality play, and like it's like the fact she watches him burn alive is something like, you know, Mikhail would have saved him. You know, maybe it's something like that, and they didn't want to show her as so merciless.
It could be one of those things that's actually not in the book, and they chose to
maybe
adapt it more faithfully or something like that. I mean, I don't know this. I'm just spitballing.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah. All right, so Millennium is an interesting franchise to talk about because in a lot of ways, as we've kind of just discussed now, it actually kind of fails miserably as a franchise. You know, this is the franchise podcast, and what we're really talking about is one really good standalone movie which was made twice, and then a few like vastly inferior sequels.
Yeah.
So my main issue with every sequel, including The Spider's Web, whether or not you consider that a sequel or not, is that the story gets way too personal. And I think before I'd seen them, I assumed that they were all Lisbeth and Mikhail solve a crime together, right?
Yeah.
But Dragon Tattoo is so good. Dragon Tattoo is the only one that is that, basically. And it's so good because it isn't a case that's directly linked to either character, but it is their personal histories which allow them to be the kinds of people who would be attracted to that mystery and solve that mystery. So in terms of Mikhail, he's kind of, it's like his one shot to get out of, you know, to make some money before he I think in the Swedish version he's going to jail for 3 months, and in the Fincher version he's just, you know, his name's been tarnished. So he's like down on his luck, he's got nowhere else to turn, so he takes the job more out of like it's something he's got no other choice. And for Lisbeth, it's like there's a fantastic little soundbite which I feel like they would have made for the trailer for the Fincher version, but it also just is, it's like Fincher's real good at like dialogue porn. I love Fincher's dialogue so much, and not that he writes his scripts, but still.
Yeah, well, I mean, he teamed up with like Gillian Flynn and Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah, true. And it basically, when they first meet in Fincher's version, and Mikhail's trying to convince her to follow him, he goes, "I want you to help me catch a killer of women." And it's such a sharp line, and it catches her attention, and it's so like, this is what the movie's about. It's about a killer of women. You know, and all the implications that come with that, and like if you're thinking about feminism or whatever, they're there, and they're
feminism or whatever.
Well, you know what I mean, like the film.
It's like the opinion of someone who says feminism. It's like feminism. Yeah, he's mentioning it, and then immediately following it with or whatever, just like makes it sound like
I'm a feminist. I'm a proud feminist, so feminism, yes. Do you know what I mean? It's because feminism is very much. You might laugh at me for saying this. It's an undercurrent. No one says you're a feminist in the movie. The movie is feminist in the actions it shows, not in the message it's preaching. With dialogue. Right, sure. And so that line is like real emblematic of the series. And so what I was getting at was like, Lisbeth is attracted to this case of solving the murders, because one thing we haven't mentioned is that while Harriet disappeared, they basically work out that there've been a series of women being murdered over like the same time period that they think are intrinsically related for reasons that you can watch the film and remind yourself of. And yeah.
And then it's also funny how. So, like you mentioned, that's got like that dialogue point, and also like not only is that a great line, but it's the Mikhail saying that he deliberately is saying that to get her on board because he knows how to word the case. Yeah. And then there's kind of, and it's a very trailer line.
Yeah, as I
said, but then Spider's Web, in another sort of pale imitation. Kind of thing, has the line, "Are you not Lisbeth Salander, the hurter of men who hurt women?"
Yeah.
And it's like, it's kind of an awkward line, and it's also like the fifth to last line of the film, which is kind of just like a weird thing
Do you remember
to have. Yeah.
Do you remember in that trailer, she's like, "Why is it, Lisbeth? Why is it that a spider doesn't get caught in its own web?" And then that line's not in the movie. And I was like, it's
Yeah.
a cheesy line, but it's a good line. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of those like metaphors. Where it's like, ooh,
It's a good
what
good
does it
metaphor.
mean for the world of the film?
What does it mean? I hope one day I'll work out what the title of the movie of my life is called based on some real good metaphor that someone says to me. I'll be like, that'd be a good title for my movie about me in the meta universe. So my main issue...
A title about me. It's called A Title About Me.
Yeah, so all of the sequels and Spider's Web, if you consider a sequel or not, they're pretty much all about Lisbeth's history. So I literally groaned when we find out that Zelashenko and Niederman are her father and brother and the girl who played with fire. I was like, oh, why are they her brother and father? I kind of hate like familial plot twists like that because they actually don't mean that much. Like maybe I can't speak for everyone, but if I didn't know who my like long lost brother was, and then I found out he was my nemesis, it didn't really change anything.
You'd be like, oh, lazy writer.
Like I guess maybe it would change something if you were like looking for your brother the whole time or whatever. But in this case, she doesn't even know she has a brother, so it's so needless for Niederman to be for her to need a man.
More like needless, man.
It's so needless for her to need a man.
Oh my gosh, that's why.
Yeah, and so I didn't really like that, and the film that Played with Fire does have a B story, which kind of operates as that external case about human trafficking in the same way that the Harriet mystery kind of is in the first film, but it ends up being like intrinsically related to Lisbeth as a person, you know?
Yeah.
And then Hornet's Nest is pretty much solely about Lisbeth and her court hearing, and it dredges up stuff like her that like I felt crafted her character. Like we're informing a character, and it repurposes that to be front and center. This is the plot, and I kind of wish if there was going to be a court case in it, I kind of wish that was the B story, and we had a case be the A story.
That's interesting, and I guess we'll kind of get to more of that in my continue the franchise. But I kind of disagree with you there.
Oh, okay, interesting that you would tell me that. All right,
Why?
I don't know. So
it's not interesting. It's boring.
Spider's Web, as I've called it here.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about Spider's Web. I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay. For as much shit as it gets, I feel like it is the closest to the to Dragon Tattoo in terms of what Dragon Tattoo promises for its sequels, or what I was expecting the sequels to be.
Yeah, okay, yep.
Because it's actually about a problem that's bigger than Lisbeth, and although it's her sister, and the plot is saving the world, which is such a signpost of a sequel that's jumped the shark, is when it's gone from a personal story to saving the world.
Yeah. And for the record, these issues are with the novel as well, we're saying. You know.
Yeah, that would be what I would say is what I find interesting about Spider's Web, I guess, is that it's...
I'd say Spider's Web is more franchise friendly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially that's what it seems like they were trying to do is like make a James Bond for feminists, essentially. Yeah. Like, you know, this kind of this role that can be recast every now and then and is about saving the world with a technological twist.
But I think if instead of doing a female James Bond, Lisbeth Salander should be that's a good idea. They just haven't done it well.
Oh no, yeah, I agree, and that's why I was like, I mean, it does well what it's trying to do. Exactly. I mean, I don't think the box office results, you know, lend themselves to creating a franchise. But I mean, Lisbeth's a great character in 4 out of 5 of these movies, and one of them she's Claire Foy with a haircut, and. Yeah, it is a really interesting thing but at the same time, it's one of those like, why do you have to take an existing character? Why can't you just, you know, create a strong female character that can lead an action franchise?
That's another interesting way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, you know, obviously there are reasons why you take an existing character because. It's easier.
Yeah. So not to continue the franchise just yet, but this does encroach on it. But don't Don't then go like, well, my idea is this, unless your idea is...
What's your idea for the...
So overall, as like in broad strokes, what I've been saying is I think there is too much coincidence in the sequels, and it pulls the characters towards each other, where a dragon tattoo was a happy accident. Like, they need to remove all the personal ties. I didn't like that Björman, who's her evil guardian, I didn't like that he was a main part of the sequels.
Yeah, although I do want to say that, because it's in Dragon Tattoo, it's kind of... I don't know if gratuitous is the right word, but it's like a very... because there is an explicit rape scene in these films. It's not, you know, we see what he's going to do and then it cuts away. Like, you kind of... It's there. And I like that actually became very important. The fact that we see it became very important in the sequels.
Yeah.
And because she films it, and we see that footage in every film.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think us recognizing what it looked like, you know, it became very important. And I like that it sort of justified itself by making that a very important plot point.
Sure. I guess what I'm more getting at is like, the sequels isn't like Mikhail reconnects with Lisbeth after a couple years of not talking to her, and he's like, I need you to help me with another case. Because that's more intriguing to me than by coincidence their lives end up together again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Pixar thing of coincidences to get people into trouble are clever, but coincidences to get you out of trouble is lazy storytelling.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the opposite of what I'm saying, because it's the coincidence that they get them into trouble, I guess. But
yeah, but I mean, it's more that like
he's getting out of trouble in the sense that he's got
now
Elizabeth
with his buddy.
is here. Yeah. They needed to just forego with finding clever ways to reintroduce them back to him and just have him ask her, because he would. You know, Mikhail's a kind-hearted. That's what I love about Mikhail Blomkvist. He's just a really warm dude. Do you feel that? Like, he's just a real nice guy.
Yeah.
One of the scenes I always remembered, even from when I saw Dragon Tattoo in the cinemas in 2011, is after the guy who's hired him, Henrik, has a stroke or something like that, and everyone, like the whole town's in panic, the whole like Vanga family's in panic, and then Mikhail runs up to one of the characters who's in the car, and he's like, what's going on? He's like, I don't know. And Mikhail goes, he like taps the car and he goes, you've got to go. And like, but it's like he's understanding that he can't hold him up. It's like a very human moment that's always stuck out to me as real good acting from Daniel Craig. Who I actually...
it's an interesting character for Daniel Craig to play as well.
I really like him in Dragon Tattoo. I think it's it's strikingly different to James Bond, which I think is what everyone was expecting it to just be the same as. Like, because
you look at the marketing for the film, and it's very much like it's kind of marketed as like a detective story, but there's kind of more to it than that. But yeah, because Daniel Craig, everyone just associates him with this stoic, super hyper masculine character that he hates playing.
Yeah.
But when you see him having fun, and having fun is maybe like something like Logan Lucky is very obviously having fun, but I think he definitely enjoys doing something like Dragon Tattoo a lot more. And I think if you stopped him in the street and you were like, oh my god, I loved you in The Girl with Dragon Tattoo, he would be a lot more willing to have a conversation with you about it than, you know,
interesting theory.
Than James Bond.
Try it out, everybody.
Yeah.
Next time you see him in the street.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, Harrison Ford, if you say, oh, I love Indiana Jones or I love Han Solo, he's just like, oh, no, I'm Harrison Ford. But if you're like, Blade Runner was the one that he always liked talking about.
I really love the interview after Blade Runner 2049 came out, where they're like, so what did you think of the film, Harrison? And he goes, can I swear on your show? And they're like, yeah, and he goes, I thought it was fucking awesome. And it's like Harrison Ford's kind of been on record for promoting his movies quite well. Like, he'll say he scolded Shia LaBeouf for speaking out against Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but there was something so genuine about it that is like, I believe Harrison Ford felt that 2049 was an important movie for his career, you know?
Yeah, he's definitely like, that's the character he asked to revisit, you know? Whereas the other ones were like, you have to, and it was whatever. Yeah. But yeah, Harrison Ford's got like great, very dry, very understated sense of humor.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't get it. But
Yep.
once you're kind of in on the joke of Harrison Ford in interviews and stuff like that, he's a very funny man.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're not here to talk about it.
No.
What we are here to talk about is Girl with Dragon Tattoo. And one thing that I loved about this film is actually not in the film.
Well, we're only here to talk about the girl with the dragon tattoo. Richard,
Sorry. Okay.
Harrison Ford
Harrison Ford is beautiful in the girl.
as the titular girl with the dragon tattoo.
Yeah, as the tattoo. The tattoo is actually like it's on the IMDb trivia. It's like the tattoo is actually of actor Harrison Ford.
It's voiced by Harrison Ford. The tattoo talks.
This had one of the Fincher version, one of, if not the greatest trailer of all time, I think. It's a very interesting trailer because, this is the original teaser I'm talking about. It was a minute and a half long, essentially, and it has a cover of Immigrant Song, sung by Karen O of the Years, composed by Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails. And it's every single beat, so it's like do cuts, and so there's a new shot every single.
There's a new dragon tattoo story every second.
More than every second. I count, and in 90 seconds, there's over 160 cuts just in this trailer, and you can't tell what the story is. But it gives you captures the tone, the sort of jarring nature of it tells you that you're in for quite a confronting story. The imagery used in the trailer, the cinematography is beautiful, and I believe the trailer was edited by David Fincher himself.
Right.
And it's actually a work of art, you know. And when I spoke to when Jeremy and I interviewed Zoe, the movie trailer editor, we talked about trends in movie trailers, and she said that when the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo teaser was released, everyone was like, "Do us one of those."
Wow.
And so, I mean, it's inimitable.
Yeah.
But, well, I mean, it's obviously very imitable because it's got such a clear style and kind of an easy way to.
Yeah, it's not too hard to do that.
Yeah. But, you know, obviously it's very obvious what you're trying to do. It's not like the slowed down piano version of a current song that sort of, could be from a few different places.
We like to party with Molly. Yeah, that it like plays slowed down, creepy versions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
and I believe that trailer was leaked early.
Yeah, there was issues with the trailer. And then I remember they also released the like story trailer was 8 minutes long.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's bad.
But no, it's just really interesting. It had really interesting marketing, this film.
Yeah.
I know that the main trailer was about 3 minutes long, and trailers tend to be 2.5. So, and I remember reading this years ago. I never see it mentioned, but like trailers have to be 2.5 minutes, and like I think it's either once or twice a year each studio is allowed to go over that once, or like once or twice.
I don't think that's true anymore. Surely, like trailers.
Yeah, I guess because trailers are such a different beast now.
Yeah, maybe I'm just noticing the long ones that are the ones they're going over with each year.
Yeah, and well, I guess like this is just for theatrical trailers as well.
Yeah. Do you remember the movie Your Highness?
Yes.
That was like I remember distinctly that being the longest trailer of my life. Such a long trailer. It was like 3.5 minutes.
Yeah, and it's a bad movie.
Cool. All right, so being that we are slowly like building a mental encyclopedia for film franchise Fortnights of the science of a franchise. I guess Spider's Web is a specific category that we've not really talked about too much on the podcast before, which is the idea of a soft reboot as a continuation. I don't want to use the word sequel because a reboot isn't a sequel, but it is part of a franchise. So basically every source online refers to this as a soft reboot. Like, it's every time you see it written about, it's written with an air of like, nobody really told me if this is a sequel to the Fincher version or not, so I don't really know. And I don't think even The Feet knows. I think he made it so that it could go either way.
Because I think it's one of those, like, if it's successful, we'll be like, oh yeah, it was You know, they're
Yeah.
part of the same thing. And since it wasn't, they're like, it was an attempt at rebooting
Well,
it.
it's the recent application of that would be Bumblebee, the Transformers movie, which wasn't a reboot until it did good, and then they're like, yeah, it was a reboot.
Yeah.
Because what are some other soft reboots that you could like? Are there any other sequels you can think of that maybe aren't sequels and just continuity shifts? I'm sure James Bond is full of them, to be honest. Whenever they switch between,
Yeah, like Casino Royale was kind of a big one,
yeah.
which is also a Daniel Craig.
Oh shit!
It's the only other one I can think of.
Yeah, well, I mean, plenty of the older ones do have like a distinct change in tone whenever they change actor, I guess. Yeah, I choose to think of it as a reboot. I prefer it as a reboot and not it's as a sequel because
Yeah, I like the term soft reboot.
yeah, mainly my main piece of evidence for this is Mikhail is younger and has a Swedish accent now. Whereas whatever, I don't know what Daniel Craig's Mikhail's story was, but he had his English accent. So maybe he was a Swedish, an English-born Swede or something like that. Whereas Mikhail's now
thousands of reasons that they could be,
yeah. Now Mikhail's like a as young as Lisbeth and has a Swedish accent. Yeah,
and kind of because in terms of a soft reboot, it does kind of it kind of waters down a lot the characters in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So like Elizabeth in the Ridge Tridge, and especially in Fitch's version, is this like social outcast, and it's very clear why, and she's doing it to herself. And I mean, maybe it's just because she's gone through the events of Play with Fire and Hornet's Nest, but she, like I said before, she is just Claire Foy with a haircut. And I mean, obviously, she's more than that. So hyperbole. But there is a kind of a few things that betray the character of Lisbeth, and there was one that stuck out to me watching it again, and I'd be interested to get your take on this because it does feel like it's intentional, and so like it's one of those things. It's like it's almost so bad that they kind of meant to do it, and they have to have meant to do it. I'm reading it wrong, but so. The villain in the film is Lisbeth's sister, and the film starts with them playing chess together, and then Zalashenko comes into the room, and basically you can tell he's going to abuse them, both sexually and physically. And Lisbeth escapes. She jumps out the window and escapes, runs away, and then leaves her sister. And the final confrontation of the film is Lisbeth and Camilla on a cliffside, and Camilla does, why did you never help me? Why did you leave your own sister? Are you not Lisbeth Salander, the herder of men who hurt women? And she says, every single day you chose not to save me, kind of thing. And then Elizabeth says, you chose him, referring to her abuser.
Yeah.
And Camilla, according to Wikipedia, Camilla realizes the error of her ways and steps off the cliff to her death. Now, this is and then there's a couple more scenes, but they both have words. So, you chose him is the final line of the film. It's Lisbeth's final line. And to me, that goes against everything that Lisbeth stands for. It's a variation on, it's your fault you got raped.
Yeah, totally.
And
I totally see what you mean. It's good. When I heard it again this time round, I did think, and that thought kind of like floated through my mind, but I was so bored there. But I just wasn't really concentrating. But yeah, no, that's a good point, yeah.
And that's one of those things, I don't really see it mentioned, but it almost makes this the worst one, Yeah,
it's because it's like what we're talking about on the Oscars episodes, how like I would rather watch Crash than Around the World in 80 Days, even though like Around the World in 80 Days is a less offensive movie because there's two types of bad. There's bad because it's boring and bad because it's offensive. If we're talking about either franchises or that kind of thing. And so this is one of those things where it betrays the spirit of the character because one of the most famous kind of conventions of feminist film would be the Bechdel test, which, if you don't know, says that to pass the Bechdel test, you have to have two named female characters talk to each other about something other than a man in your film. And the fact that this is all about a man, and not in the same way Dragon Tattoo is all about a man, because Dragon Tattoo is all about a man in the sense that they're trying to catch a killer of women, and in this it's like, and it's not like it's a romantic thing because it's their dad, but it is still, it's like it's all coming back to how they were treated by a man and not them finding their own emancipation, which I think is what Stieg Larsson would have wanted to go for.
But I do. It's a very deliberate choice because the following scenes have no dialogue to make "you chose him" be the last line of the film. And Wikipedia referencing that as Camilla then realizing the error of her ways, like, oh shit, it was my choice to get systematically abused for years and killing herself because of it. And I want my reading of it to be wrong, but I don't see how that works. Or maybe it's because the way Elizabeth looks over the cliff after Camilla's fallen. Maybe it's now Elizabeth's realizing the error of her ways, but I mean I can't think of another way to read it other than
she's victim blaming her.
Yeah, essentially, and that goes against everything that Elizabeth stands for. Being a survivor of sexual assault herself.
Yeah.
How can you say that to another woman? And I can't imagine what, because, like Girl with Dragon Tattoo, as harrowing as it is and as triggering as it may be for someone to watch that's gone through that kind of thing, it's empowering to women, especially.
That's what I was saying to, I have a flatmate who I invited to watch the Fincher version with me, and I told her, I said, this has like a rape scene in it, but it is one of the most quintessential examples of like a fuck yeah, I'm a feminist movie.
Yeah. And and Spider's Web deliberately chooses to undo all that. And and I can't imagine what that would be like. And because, obviously like the word triggering is thrown around as kind of like an insult for millennials. But I mean, it is a very real thing that can happen to people. And
even taking away buzzwords from it, it's disappointing as well,
but I mean, if you were a survivor of sexual assault and the final line delivered by your feminist hero can be summed up as "it's your fault," that must be horrible.
She's also saying you chose him in the context of when you were a powerless little girl, you chose to stay.
Yeah.
Whereas I chose to run away in the snow, which is
whereas I chose to fall to my death and happen to survive it.
Yeah, totally. I love how this is this revelation for you that Spider's Web is the worst one, whereas like Dragon Tattoo purists are probably like, what are you? Of course it's the worst one.
Yeah. No, I mean like, and I can see every way why this is the worst one. The whole end of the world plot, and I'm sure the book is worse. But it's offensive in a different way that I didn't pick up on the first time I saw it. Because the first time I saw it, I was like, it's obviously not as good as Finch's one or even the original, but it's not trying to be. It's trying to be something different. And yeah, I think I picked up on a lot more of that, and especially going from watching, and I actually watched them out of order. I watched David Fincher's one first because I started watching them on the weekend, and for so long I've been trying to get Jess to watch David Fincher's one because I'm like, this is a real fucking good film.
Yeah.
And and then I was like, if I do it, then it'll be like Tuesday night by the time I get around to watching Fincher's version. So I was like, let's watch this one. I want to start on a high.
Yeah.
And then I can watch the other ones just on my own time. But yeah, I do also want to talk about, now that I'm off my high horse, I'm going to tell a story that I'm telling to try and make myself look cool, but it's going to make me sound like a dick.
Very
as
cool.
is the
Very
Richard
on
way.
brand.
Yeah. But so you and I, we were both went to broadcast. We went to film school, I'll call it. And on our first day, they did like, stand up in front of the class and tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us your favorite movie. And a girl in my class was like, "Hi, my name's blank." That wasn't her name. I'm blanking it out for privacy reasons. And she was like, "Oh, my favorite movie is the one where, like, it's quite it only came out a couple of years ago, and it's like the black-haired chick, and she's kind of like a punk, and just kind of like poorly described the girl with dragon tattoo." And I was like, "You mean the girl with the dragon tattoo?" And she was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Fun sale." I was like, "What? Like, I get you want to sound cool by listing that as your favorite film, but like, remember the name of it if you're going to tell the class."
And at film school,
Yeah.
what your favorite film is, and it's by an auteur director that any film student worth their salt could fucking tell you that it's David Fincher's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Yeah. And I also think that, and because I was like, "Oh, they're like, do you mean like the girl with dragon tattoo?" She's like, "Yeah." And I was like the original, the remake. And she was like, "Oh, like I just thought this, didn't
the
even know it was a
original
remake."
or the remake is like someone if they were writing a character who was a nerdy film student in like The Simpsons, that would be like a line of dialogue they'd write in there. The original or the remake?
Well, yeah, because it was just like, it wasn't like actually was it? It was more just like, what are you doing?
Just casual, yeah, kind of like,
yeah, like
okay,
like because it's like, because she was kind of like, "As a class, can you help me work out my favorite film?" And it was like, "It's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo." "Yeah, okay, there's 2 movies. Which one is it?" "Oh, I didn't know there was 2. So the American one." "Okay." So,
dude, she's not allowed to have it be her favorite movie. I'm calling it here. All right, okay. If we can move into another conversation, if unless you want to keep staying up on your high horse about being cooler than other people, was that? You
no,
can stay up there.
I feel like that comes naturally when I converse with you.
Yeah, true. No, I agree. And so, okay, so we haven't really mentioned it yet, but a big part of at least the first film, and it kind of it looms over the sequels, is that Lisbeth and Mikhail become romantically involved. And the way it's presented in the movie is one of the most interesting ways I've ever seen, like, they get together trope play out. And so the question, and I actually looked this up and found some cool interpretations of it, but the question I have for you is, why do you think Lisbeth bangs Mikhail? Because she chooses to do it. He's like,
I mean, you just answered the question.
No, but why does she choose to do it?
I think we see throughout the various films that Elizabeth's a very sexual being.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there is things about like empowerment, because this is after she's been raped by her guardian, and I mean, there's so many different ways to read it. One is just she enjoys sex and she's staying with a man, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm going to have sex with him."
Yeah.
Or you could read it as like, because she very much, I mean, obviously it's consensual, but it's her, kind of.
He wasn't expecting it.
Take your clothes off. We're doing this because I want it.
Yeah.
And I'm choosing to do this essentially. And so I guess you can look at it as like she's kind of taking back her sexuality after it was kind of stolen from her. Or it's like a preemptive, she's kind of been betrayed by almost every man in her life, and she's doing this like preemptive, I'm taking control over you in a way.
I want to pick on that point because I think that's key to it, because there's a one bit the very subtle moment in Fincher's one that I think is quite cool, which is she's using his laptop. This is after they've like teamed up, and she wakes up and she's using her laptop. They haven't slept together yet, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Oh, going through your notes." And she like, she's looking at something and she's like, "What's this?" And he walks over to her laptop and he does that thing like, when you're teaching someone how to golf and you like put your arms around them and hug them.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm always teaching people how to golf.
Yeah. And he puts his arms over her to like check something, and she like flinches, and he doesn't look too awkward. He doesn't think it's that big of a deal, but he goes like, "Oh, sorry," and like
he picks up on it.
Yeah, he picks up on it and like does very small, very quiet apology, and they move on, and it's not a big deal, but it's such an intentional moment of direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and Finch's like, that's kind of his bread and butter, is those moments where it's like, you can tell at the time, like, why did they include that?
Yeah,
and then,
exactly.
and then it's paid off.
Yeah, Chekhov's gun, baby.
Yeah. It's not even necessarily that it's like this moment is set up and then paid off. It's just, it was hinted at here when you watched again. Yeah,
and so that's like a microcosm of, I think, the key to why she sleeps with him, because there's not really any romantic tension between them before this moment. In fact, I think that's why it sticks out so much, is because she barely even seems to like him.
Yeah, and I think when I first saw these movies, when they came out in 2009, 10, 11 kind of area, I was a bit like, oh, that was very out of left field. But I think having matured myself, there's a sense to it that that small moment where he like gives her space. It's like that's how she approves of him, and combined with things like themes of like a woman taking her sexuality, like having control of her sexuality and stuff like that, like all combined into this thing where it's like he is the only man in the movie so far, except for her first guardian, who doesn't seem to be trying to take advantage of her in some way, and so. In a way, it's like that's what's attractive about him to her. Yeah.
I don't know. It's you Google why does Lisbeth and it auto completes sleep with Mikhail in Google. So it's like it's a very strange but intentional
and I'm
moment.
sure that people more well read than us could have very well-written essays about this, with looking at it from a feminist angle and
for sure, and I'd love to hear them. But the one of the answers I read on some of these forums was like, Mikhail is Larson inserting himself into the story, and so maybe he just wanted to have a sexy girlfriend, and everyone like hounded on this guy like Larson was a staunch feminist, and like being like, that's not true, he wouldn't do that. So a lot of Larson defenders out there, not good on them, I guess.
Yeah, Larson apologists. Because it just, correct me if I'm wrong, but he only wrote 3 novels. It was these ones, and they were all released after he died, right?
I'm no idea, but if he wrote 3 and they were all released after he died, that would suggest he's hoarding them or problems with.
It was like, I think there was.
I've heard tell that he witnessed a sexual assault and didn't do anything to help her, and that's what inspired the books. That's like what's that Phil Collins song? It's like, he saw someone drowning.
In the air of the night.
Yeah, in the air
of the night. I said in the air of the night is what Eminem calls it in Stan. But yeah.
You know how people talk about the origins of that song, and it's not even true. That's what I've heard for Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
He wrote some non-fiction books by the looks of it, and there's like other.
He's a journalist, so he is a journalist, so he would have written other magazines and stuff. Cool. All right, so let's talk a few fun bits of trivia, and then we'll move into
randomly placed trivia.
No, this is trivia about the movie.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
This is closer to IMDb trivia.
Oh my god, please.
So offer me your thoughts on this. When casting started, so Lisbeth Salander for the Fincher version, the role was offered to Natalie Portman, but she declined due to exhaustion, and Scarlett Johansson.
She'd just done Black Swan, yeah?
Yeah, she would have. Yeah. And Scarlett Johansson, but David Fincher considered her too sexy. Jennifer Lawrence was also considered, but she was rejected because she's too tall.
Yeah, I do remember Scarlett Johansson. I remember reading a quote from David Fincher where he basically said, talked about the casting process and said, Scarlett Johansson came in, she did a very good audition, and she was perfect for the part. She would have played the part very well, but because of the rape scene and the nudity required in that, he said, if you cast her in it, people are just going to see this film because they want to see Scarlett Johansson naked.
Yeah. And
he said the movie then becomes about that, and that's so detrimental to the film and goes against what the film stands for, which is I mean, it's true. I mean, like, there are people out there who would just, like, this would just be the film where, because, I mean, you look at something like Under the Skin.
Yeah.
How much do you know about that film?
I mean, I've seen it, but it is also the movie that Scarlett Johansson gets naked in.
Exactly. And so I think he made the right choice. And it sounds like it's intensely anti-feminist, saying, I didn't put her in the movie because, it's her being naked is a landmark moment. But yeah, I think he made the right choice because he didn't want his film to become that. And I think Rooney Mara is amazing in this film. She was Oscar by nominated. Far the best Elizabeth, I think.
Yeah, I
and I mean, I'm sure there's you could look at the interpretation of the character in the books and stuff like that. But she's the most well-rounded character. The design of her is amazing, and she's really one of those, and kind of everyone apart from sort of the supporting players, but I guess mainly the two leads are not who I would have cast.
Sure.
They're not they wouldn't appear in my fan casting of a remake, but fuck, they're perfect, and they're so yes, of course, this is your counterpart to the original.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that she's the best Lisbeth because there was campaigning to recast
to get
Noomi back in for the American
I remember
for the Fincher version.
Because I think I'd seen the original and the sequels before the remake came out.
Right.
So I was kind of following the casting and development of it quite.
I think Rooney Mara is a great choice, and it's funny that he thought Scarlett Johansson was too sexy because I think Rooney Mara is way sexier for the reason of she's way more mysterious and odd looking.
Yeah, sure.
And I think what's interesting, I feel like this was the first Rooney Mara movie I ever saw, and then whatever I saw her in next. No, I would have seen The Social Network, but she wasn't really a household name by that point.
Yeah, which is also why he was hesitant to cast her, I believe.
Right. But yeah, and how different does Rooney Mara look in this movie compared to most of her other roles? It's insane. Yeah.
Yeah, she's amazing.
All right, and Johnny Depp, Viggo Mortensen, Brad Pitt, and George Clooney were all considered for Mikhail. What do you think of that? Viggo's probably the most interesting to me.
Oh, I mean, Viggo's the best actor. I mean, just not even out of that list. He's just the best actor. I love Viggo Mortensen.
Right.
I've gone on such a Viggo binge this year. Not only watching Lord of the Rings, but I've just happened to watch all these other ones.
Well, we watched Green Book as well.
Yeah, Green Book. I've also watched Captain Fantastic and History of Violence. I think he's probably my most watched actor this year.
Yeah, interesting.
Actually, tell you what, Cate Blanchett is because she's in all 6 Hobbit movies, and I also watched Carol. But yeah, Viggo's second with 6 films. Fun fact for you.
That's like a randomly placed useless statistic about your life instead of the podcast.
Also, do you want to know another randomly placed useless statistic about my life? Is Girl in Spider's Web was the 200th of 251 films I watched last year, and this year it's the 88th.
Cool.
Of 88 so far. So I'm getting through films a lot quicker this year.
Nice.
But where were we? I was talking about something.
Viggo?
Viggo, yeah. Well, talking about the casting of Mikhail. So I do. Daniel Craig is kind of because obviously you see him as James Bond, and you expect him to kind of look like that. And I know he did put on a little bit of weight because he thought Mikhail should be pudgier then. Yeah. And I mean, maybe he didn't quite do enough because he's still Daniel Craig, and but he's not he's a very handsome man, but he's not traditionally handsome. I think that's why George Clooney or
Brad Pitt.
Johnny Depp or Brad Pitt would have been bad choices. But at the same time, especially George Clooney and Brad Pitt, I think could have played the character very well because
very interesting roles for both of those actors. It would have been.
Yeah, but they both tend to play George Clooney. I think would have nailed this. George Clooney is a really good actor, and he can kind of disappear into roles like this. And he's one of those actors that you always aware you're watching George Clooney, but he's puts on weight for certain things and stuff like that. Brad Pitt is a character actor with leading man's looks.
Yeah.
Because and it's interesting, Brad Pitt's one of those actors you think about and you're yeah, he's the biggest actor in the world.
Yeah.
But he's not really an above the title kind of, that kind of actor where it's Brad Pitt is in he's in Moneyball and I guess World War Z are the only two ones I can think of where it's like Brad Pitt and a bunch of other actors that aren't this actor, and then Brad Pitt in a really good role, or Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie in, where it's a
Mr.
two-header.
and Mrs. Smith.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think Daniel Craig's perfect choice. I think he's not necessarily the only person that could have played it, but he's
I
really
deeply
good choice
enjoy
think of.
Daniel Craig and his Mikhail.
100%.
Speaking of him, this is something that I read on IMDb trivia, and it was something I thought while watching the film. Do you remember when Mikhail catches the water bottle?
Yeah, vaguely. I remember this. I remember seeing this as a bit of trivia, but not remembering what it was, and then I don't remember.
Yeah.
When is it actually in the film?
It's, I don't know, about maybe halfway through. He walks into his cottage and he gets something from the top of the fridge, and then a water bottle rolls off, and he like sort of does this eccentric like lunge and catches it and puts it back up there. And watching it, I was like, that was improvised, and they decided to keep it in. And that was improvised, and director David Fincher appreciated Craig's grace and left it in the film. But I mean, again, I think what I like about Daniel Craig's Mikhail is he's a very real character. He feels very familiar and realistic, and so I guess that's another example of that, where he's doing something as human as catching something as it's falling off a off a surface.
I've just found a gif of it.
What do you think?
Oh yeah, nice.
Everybody listen to the GIF.
Because he starts to walk away from the fridge and then notices that it's falling, and he lunges back on one foot and then does that thing, when you're like catching something that's usually like if you're catching a ball and you kind of your hand makes contact with it above your head and you follow the ball down to like sort of slow it down with your hand. He does that with the bottle where it's like guiding it down, and yeah, it is very graceful.
I watched a Science of Superman documentary once when I was a kid, where that's how they explained why Lois doesn't shatter to pieces when Superman catches her when she's falling off a building.
No, there is actually down. It's mentioned that he essentially has a power that
really
that solves the issue.
Wow.
I mean, it's one of those things like in the Flash, it's like Speed Force. It is the answer to. It's like, oh yeah, Speed Force and Pym particles in the Marvel universe is like, this makes no sense. This goes explicitly against what you've established earlier in the film. No, it's Pym particles. Yeah. Well, look, I'm no Superman, Richard, but what I am is a man who talks about taglines sometimes. Oh. And there are two taglines for Fincher's Dragon Tattoo. Welcome to film franchise Fortnights, where we talk mainly about one film and kind of brush over the sequels. So the taglines for... Oh, we've been talking for like an hour and a half.
That's true.
Why are we welcoming them now?
Well... This is where I'm going to edit it. So this is the start.
If you've just joined us.
So Fincher's movie has two taglines. One is "Evil shall with evil be expelled," and what is hidden,
biblical, which ties into the film.
Yeah, and what is hidden in snow comes forth in the thaw. Is the other. Now you say they're biblical. They're actually not. They're Swedish proverbs.
Oh, nice.
And apparently,
it sounds biblical.
Yeah. And apparently Stellan Skarsgård himself a Swede, told them to David Fincher during filming. Fincher liked them and thought they fit the story setting so well, he made them the taglines for the movie. They are great taglines, especially "Evil shall with evil be expelled." Yeah,
and it's good having Stellan Skarsgård in the film as well. We haven't really talked about him, but like a Swede.
Yeah,
I remember him like saying he was very happy to, because it's like the first time in like 20 years when he can sleep in his own bed filming.
Yeah, because he lives in Stockholm. Yeah. Well, seeing as you love talking about Stellan Skarsgård so much, Richard, let's move into strategically placed useless statistics.
Oh my gosh.
So don't say what the other franchise is, because it's a spoiler, but this is our second franchise to feature Stellan Skarsgård as a character who ends up being the bad guy. I'm not going to say. I feel like it's unfair to just drop what the other one is, because that feels like
listen to all of our podcasts,
but
or watch all of the films we've spoken about in the podcast.
As a special hint, that kind of just gives it away if you're keen. That other franchise where he ends up being a bad guy is also one which had multiple entries come out in the same year as each other.
Yeah, true.
This is our second franchise to feature Stephen Merchant in an uncharacteristically serious role after X-Men.
Yeah, are these his only two serious roles?
Maybe.
Because I know Logan was his first like foray into drama.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Spider's Web was the second. And I was actually thinking before that we haven't spoken about, but he's really good in this film.
Yeah, he is good.
His character, so again, it's the kind of like, yeah, he is a good idea to cast in this role. And Stephen Misha,
next to Lakeith Stanfield, I'd say is probably my favorite character in Spider's Web.
Yeah, and Lakeith Stanfield, again, we haven't spoken about him much, but fuck, I love him. He's one of my favorite actors currently working.
He's going to be in 30 years. I'm going to refer to Lakeith Stanfield as one of the all-time greats. I think I love Lakeith Stanfield.
He's great at picking his roles. I do think his character in Spider's Web is a little kind of doesn't necessarily fit the universe or something like that.
Yeah, but that's Spider's Web in a nutshell, right?
Exactly.
The girl in a nutshell.
Help, I'm in a nutshell.
Sweet. So this is our second franchise in which Fede Alvarez directs an entry which may or may not be a reboot of the franchise after the Evil Dead series, because he directed Evil Dead, which most people would call a remake or a reboot, but then at the end of the credits, Bruce Campbell in silhouette is like groovy, which seems to imply they're set in the same universe, just drastically different tones.
Yeah. And to build off of that, it's our second franchise, which had a beloved original trilogy, which has had two attempts to either continue the story or reboot it, which were less successful than the studio wanted them to be, one of which was directed by Fede Alvarez.
That's really awesome. That's so true. So the Evil Dead application of that is he directed the remake and then they tried to make a TV series. The
TV series, and that's the thing, like it did well, but it got cancelled before they could finish it. So it's not quite as good as they wanted it to be.
Exactly.
And I mean, same with like David Fincher's one. It's like it did really well. It's like it just wasn't quite enough to get a sequel.
Yeah. This is our second franchise to feature all but two of the films in a primarily foreign language after Godzilla, though that will change this year when King of the Monsters comes out.
I did pick up on that as well, that it's like it's the same amount that aren't in English, even though like Godzilla has 29 in one language.
Yeah. The Swedish trilogy is our third foreign film franchise at all after Godzilla and The Raid.
Yeah. Sweet. I did want to know that as well.
Yep. And if you count Evil Dead as having a reboot, I'm going to say it's soft reboot again.
Yeah, soft reboot.
Then this is our 11th franchise to contain at least one reboot. The other 10 include, let's say, Evil Dead, Spider-Man, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Godzilla, 101 Dalmatians, The Nutty Professor, Hellraiser, and Halloween. You might count Nightmare and Friday the 13th as the same franchise. I feel like they have different reboots in and of themselves, though.
Yeah, and that was early in our days. And also, this is the... Sorry, have you listed all 10?
I've got more addendums to the 10, but that's the 10. Yep.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say that... this is our second one, which had a franchise which they hoped would make sequels. They had a reboot that they hoped would have sequels that didn't end up having sequels, although they're still being talked about, which the reboot starred Rooney Mara.
What was the other one?
Because she's a Nightmare.
Oh, of course, yeah. I didn't even think of that. I was
which came out the year before this.
Because one of the easiest statistics to conjure up are like, this is our second actor or actress film. But when I looked at Rooney Mara, I was like, when would we have watched another Rooney Mara film? That's really funny. So yeah, those are our 10 that have had a reboot. If you count Spider's Web as being the series' second reboot, which I do, then this is our fifth franchise to have at least two reboots after Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Godzilla, Hellraiser, and Halloween. Though Spider-Man has since had 3 continuities or new canons established since we've covered it, all running at the same time as the Spider-Man Homecoming, Venom, and Into the Spider-Verse. And Transformers have, as I said before, recently confirmed that Bumblebee, which came out since we covered Transformers, is also a reboot of the franchise. So, as always, the more franchises we do, the more complicated these statistics, which should be simple.
And the longer this podcast goes, the more happens that we're not covering.
Yeah. This is our 7th franchise to contain 5 films after Spider-Man, Scary Movie, Shrek, Twilight, Transformers, and Final Destination, post-recording editions of those franchises notwithstanding. And meaning that when we covered Transformers, it was only 5 films, so... we discussed 5
And
films.
Spider-Man,
Yep.
yeah.
And the last one, let me know what you think of this one, dude, because this
Okay.
might set a precedent for something we have to do for statistics from here on out. This is our second franchise to contain at least one film with the word spider in the title after Spider-Man. Our second franchise to contain at least 2 films with the word dragon or dragons in the title after Dungeons and Dragons, which also has a film called Wrath of the Dragon God, or Wrath of the Dragon God. Our second franchise to contain at least one film with the word fire in the title after The Land Before Time, The Stone of Cold Fire, and our first franchise to contain at least one film with the word Hornet in the title. So,
it's our first one with Hornet.
yeah.
I was like, what other one has Hornet?
Only one other one has fire, though. What a common word you'd think would show up more. Maybe I missed one. I looked pretty thoroughly, but I couldn't think of another one other than The Stone of Cold Fire, which is relatively obscure entry in one of our more obscure franchises.
Yeah. Oh, if I find out that you're wrong between now and when we record,
I hope you do, because I looked for a while. I spent about an hour on all those statistics.
And because you love being wrong as much as I love being right.
If being wrong is wrong, then baby, I don't want to be right.
What?
So we talk about, speaking of titles, as I just was, with words in the titles, we talk about titles a lot on this podcast, and the Millennium series, we could do a whole podcast on the titles because they're quite interesting.
So let's do it.
Yeah, all right. So there's plenty of fun.
New podcast begins. Hey, welcome to, we're talking about the Dragon Tattoo titles.
There's plenty of fun pieces of information about the titles, but first of all, what do you think of the titles as they are? Without revealing any information.
I really like them, and we kind of haven't delved into this, but I love the, I guess, continuity across, or like continuity across the sort of franchise, and especially the original Tridge is like because they were all kind of made back to back and released back to back, they're very. Even though the two were meant for TV, it doesn't feel like a massive step down in terms of production quality or anything like that. The actors are the same across all of them. They don't age drastically between films. And you might remember, if you remember when these films came out, or if you've seen the DVDs, but the posters of them is just Elizabeth's face with a different color sort of dragon covering, or, going along the side of it. And I've got the original trilogy on DVD, like 3 different DVDs, and I love the way that they line up in my collection, and or whether that's the way they're written.
There are actually alternate posters for that original trilogy that they aren't that, but they still look quite cool. I'm probably going to use them.
They still have the motif. Or the same color palette.
Yeah, I'm probably going to use them for the thumbnail for this episode, because those are the ones that Wikipedia offers, and so they're the easier ones to get.
The other ones because I like them together.
When you want to make the thumbnails, you can do that.
Fuck you. You knew I would never do that. Are you going to use the poster, the explicit poster for the 2011 one? Because there was a poster where her nipples are very clearly visible.
Yeah. I don't know if I can find it. Sure. Google Images is a wasteland these days, man. It's very hard to get pictures off Google Images these days. Okay, so it is a cool naming convention. The girl blank blank blah blank. But I'm not sure if the girl with the dragon tattoo best emphasizes what's at the center of that particular film.
Yeah,
because she's no more the main character than Mikhail is, I don't think. And
Mikhail's introduced first as well. So
and the center of the film is more the murder case. In my opinion, the best
title,
the girl
with the murder case.
The girl with the murder case. The best title, in my opinion, is The Girl Who Played with Fire, because it's kind of like quite cheeky, like because she burned her dad alive, so it's The Girl Who Played with Fire. And interestingly enough, that is the only title from the series which is a direct English translation of the original Swedish title, which was Flickan som lekte med Eden.
Yeah, maybe don't do that again.
Which literally translates to The Girl Playing with Fire.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that, because, I know that as well, but so the original trilogy, their Swedish titles translate differently, but when the books were translated into English, they normalized the titles based on the second one.
Well, because the second one's the one that's most open for that adoption or adaptation.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, because it is, I like the naming convention, but it is funny that it's one of those things where it's like, do you know it actually comes from the second one?
Yeah. So speaking of that, the original Swedish title for the girl with the dragon tattoo is Man som hatar kvinnor, which literally translates to men who hate women. I love that. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
it's
so
interesting,
dark.
Because have you seen the original cover for the books as well?
Yeah, and they're like magazines.
Yeah, they're made out like to be the cover of Millennium magazine,
Yeah.
and I think Men Who Hate Women works really well in that context because it's what would be plastered across the front of the magazine about this story, and again, the girl who played with fire is like what Mikhail would come up with and be like, oh yeah, the fuck, this is a real good title.
But do you know what the Swedish translation for the girl who kicked the hornet's nest is?
I do, but tell me.
It's in Swedish. It's luftslottet som sprangdes, which translates to
the castle in the sky.
The castle in the sky that blew up, which is a sentence that just keeps going longer than any title probably should. The novel of Spider's Web was originally Det som in dödar oss, which translates to that which does not kill us. I can definitely get behind Men Who Hate Women and Played with Fire.
Look, I 100% support Men Who Hate Women.
No. As a title. It's a real provocative title. And yeah, as I said, The Girl Who Played with Fire is really cool. I don't know if I can get behind The Castle in the Sky That Blew Up.
Yeah.
I don't even know why it's called that. Why is that the title of the movie?
Yeah, well, and like that's the thing. Like, Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, I really like as a title because it's the most metaphorical.
Yeah.
She doesn't actually kick a hornet's nest.
No, that's true.
And the Girl in the Spider's Web is one that's like, oh, she's like actually in the web of this organization called the Spiders, and also like, why don't spiders get caught in that?
Yeah. But then also, that which does not kill us is kind of generic. It's because it's what makes us stronger, right? That which
would be the sequel.
Yeah. No, actually, there is David Lagerkrantz has written one more currently. There's another one in production, which I'll get to in a second. But there is one more published one in his like Millennium takeover, which is yet to be adapted into film. That one is called The Girl Who Takes an Eye for an Eye, or Mannen som sökte sin skugga, which literally translates to The Man Who Chased His Shadow.
I like the Man Who Chose a Shadow. That's a cool.
You wouldn't call
title.
a movie The Girl Who Takes an Eye for an Eye, surely.
Yeah, that's the thing.
That's
I mean,
so
I thought
clunky.
about Kick the Hornet's Nest. I was like, well, this is the worst one. But it also did kind of annoy me growing up. And it's interesting. I thought about these things before I met you. But I did think it's annoying that Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is Girl with the something.
Yeah.
Whereas the other two are Girl Who something.
But then the girl in the spider's web.
Yeah. So that kind of makes it so it's like, oh, it's not really a defined pattern.
Yeah.
Two of them just happen to be the same.
Yeah.
Girl Who Takes an Eye for an Eye, I think, is the one that works the least as a title.
It's such a clunky title. It's too long. Because I think taking an eye for an eye, it's not an eloquent idiom, is it?
No.
If it was the girl who takes an eye, maybe then. Nothing about that's working.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, the girl who takes an eye. It's like, yeah, I can get behind the girl who takes an eye.
Yeah.
Or like, knowing nothing about it.
Which I love discussing titles.
Yeah,
like
what would you call it?
Maybe the girl who chased his shadow. So the his is like the guy who's chasing his shadow, and the other version of the title.
Mean, I don't know. I like the girl who chased her shadow. That's quite cool.
So David Lagerkrantz, whatever he says his name, is releasing another Millennium novel later this year, which is called The Girl Who Lived Twice, which is a cool title, if not a little intentionally derivative of You Only Live Twice. Annoyingly, I can't find the Swedish version of this title anywhere. It feels like that should be an easy thing to find out, but I can't. If you know what it is, let me know what it translates to.
Yeah,
because I cannot find it.
I don't.
Yeah, well, I'm talking
but yeah, that's I do kind of. It annoys me that it's short.
Yeah,
like the girl lived twice. You know, you can say it in one breath, whereas like the girl with the dragon tattoo, you have to take two.
But
I do. It's interesting. Yeah, it is a very interesting franchise to talk about titles. But I mean, yeah, hey, the Girl Who Lived Twice could get a different name. If we can't find the Swedish title, it could be renamed by August.
Yeah,
but it is also
they've already released the cover for it though, so maybe not.
Okay, I apologize. But they, I mentioned about how this is kind of like wants to be a female Jason Bourne. And kind of, it's also like adapted from. Well, let me just fact check myself. But it's like adapted from a book series, which had an original writer who wrote a trilogy and then died, and then someone else took it over, and they weren't considered very good.
Nice. So we've talked about a future Millennium story just then. So while we're speaking about continuing the franchise, let's do it ourselves, Richard. Let's continue the franchise. So in terms of the original Swedish trilogy, from what I can see, there have never been any plans to adapt the Lagercrantz novels. I mean, they came out long after. Nor were there any plans to make any more Swedish Millennium films in any way, shape, or form, though a 3-hour extended cut of each film was released for a 6-part miniseries in 2010.
Yeah, sorry, can I just quickly interject? So building on the Bourne thing, so it was an original 3 novels written by Robert Ludlum, and then 11 written by someone else. It's so ridiculous.
Well, I mean, speaking of numbers that are close to 11, before we get to the very interesting history of Finch's plans for sequels to the American Dragon Tattoo, it is worth noting that Stieg Larsson had apparently outlined, I should say, plans for 10 books in the series, and reportedly a manuscript for book 4 exists, but because he and his partner Eva Gabrielson, they never married. So she doesn't legally have the rights to finish the novel, despite offering to do so before he died. The rights are owned by Stieg's dad and brother, who apparently are not on good terms, I believe, with his wife or his partner.
Yeah, they're kind of holding them ransom from what I remember.
Which is how David Lagercrantz ended up with them. There's also talk of manuscripts for books 5 and 6 being outlined. For what it's worth, if you're interesting, because only interesting people will want to know this, while we're talking about titles, just very briefly returning to that, Larsson's 4th book has a Swedish working title of Guds Hamd, which translates to God's Revenge. Which, if these were James Bond style super series, you make them for years and years and years. I do think using the Swedish title translations, with the exception of The Castle in the Sky That Blew Up, I do think the Swedish title translations would suit a James Bond-esque series more than The Girl Who.
The Girl Who Enacted God's Revenge.
Yeah. And they'd have such little to do with what's happening in the movie that you just wouldn't be able to differentiate between Played with Fire and Hornet's Nest, even Dragon Tattoo. You could have confused Hornet's Nest and Dragon Tattoo, because... So, all right. This isn't as long as I thought it would be, the history of Finch's planned sequels, but
okay.
It is a piece of film history that is quite infamous, I guess. So in December 2011, Fincher stated, so this is the same time the movie was released, Fincher stated that the creative team involved planned to film the sequels, The Girl Who Played with Fire and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, possibly back to back. There was an announced release date of 2013 for a film version of Played with Fire, although by August 2012 it was delayed due to changes being done to the script, which seems to be what eventually became the nail in the coffin, was these script changes, because by July 2013 the script had been rewritten, I think, a couple times, and apparently was extremely different from the book, according to Fincher.
Which I think is probably for the best, since there's such a drop in quality.
Yeah. Despite the long delay, Fincher was confident that the film would be made, given that the studio had spent millions of dollars on the rights and the script. Ultimately, it is still unknown why Fincher's sequels never really came to light. Den of Geek published an article which suggested that the film's Christmas release, because this was marketed as the feel-bad movie of Christmas.
Yeah, that's what it says in the teaser.
So the Christmas release was an unwise move financially, combined with the fact that it was a story a lot of audiences had already seen before. The article also argues
only 2 years before as well.
Yeah. The article also argues that Daniel Craig was poor casting as he's too synonymous with James Bond, and that Lisbeth should have been the central character instead of Mikhail. Really, the only thing I agree on with this write-up is that the ending drags. Is something they mentioned.
Right. I do think as well that when you market a film like this with Daniel Craig in the lead, you kind of expect a different film, and so I think it's one of those like things like Drive where it didn't do very well because word of mouth wasn't great because people went in expecting one thing, got something much better, but because people are stupid, they were disappointed.
Yeah. Fun fact though, the Fincher's Girl with the Dragon Tattoo opened number 3 at the US box office behind Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol and Sherlock Holmes: A Game of Shadows. Ghost Protocol features Michael Nyqvist and Game of Shadows features Noomi Rapace.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So there you go. To be honest though, like Girl in the Spider's Web, that went so under the radar that I don't think it's even unreasonable to think that Fincher's sequels might still happen one day.
Yeah, and also because Fincher was attached to World War Z, is a World War Z sequel, World War Z for international listeners. But
that, like World War Z,
just last month
it
was said, no, it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
which was one of those things. It's like I'm disappointed, and it's also not too bad. Like when Edgar Wright left Ant-Man, that it's like, I'm gutted that we have to wait even longer for a new Edgar Wright or David Fincher movie, because it's been 5 years since his last movie, which is Gone Good, which is this fucking incredible movie. I love it.
Yeah.
But it's but then it's also like, hopefully he's going to work on a project I'm more interested in than a sequel to World War Z. Although I was very excited to see what a David Fincher World War Z movie looks like.
Yeah, that's true. As you pointed out before, I'm glad that he said that it was very different from the book, because the script was, because when I was watching the Swedish sequels, I was like, I don't want to see David Fincher make these films. Like, there's
100%
nowhere near as good. But that being said, Richard, if Fincher did adapt them, what like Fincher-esque actor would you cast in the roles of Zelashenko, Ronald Niederman, or Dr. Peter Talaborian, for example?
Man, they're good names, though. I was thinking about this while I was watching it.
Shall I kick us off?
Yeah, go for it.
So one of the things I thought while watching Played with Fire was like, he'd be Niederman would be Dolph Lundgren in a.
I 100% thought Dolph Lundgren.
And you know what?
What?
He turned down the role. So he was. Like, they were looking for a Dolph Lundgren type. He turned down the role, so they got a guy who looks very similar to Dolph Lundgren.
Oh, so he turned it down in the original?
Yes.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because he's from Sweden.
When, it was in pre-production or whatever.
No.
That's really interesting, because, it's very... Like, he's essentially just playing Ivan Drago from Rocky 4.
Yeah.
And Creed 2.
Yeah.
But... Yeah, that's really interesting, because the like sort of bleach blonde hair and the unflinching kind of, because he doesn't feel pain as well.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
A couple other options for Niederman.
He's probably
specifically.
too old now, to be fair.
Yeah. Needleman specifically, I thought he looks a bit Ron Perlman as well. But if we're looking for someone closer in age to Noomi Rapace,
to Rooney Mara.
Rooney Mara, they're such similar names.
Yeah, they've both got double O, which is so uncommon in a first name.
Yeah. I thought Dave Bautista, which is like the third or fourth time I've fan casted Dave Bautista.
Yeah, I did think Dave Bautista as well. We're so similar. Look at us.
I know. I don't know about Talaborian or Zelashenko though. Zelashenko feels Gary Oldman-esque, but that might just be because he plays a similar role in one of the Hannibal movies.
Yeah, he does have like actors he works with quite commonly. He's got like, he's one of those directors that has like recurring collaborators on his Wikipedia page. So like Kevin Spacey is on one of them.
Well, I mean, Christopher Plummer's in the first one, so
yeah.
Kevin Spacey would be a good Zelashenko. Like, not now,
Yeah.
but if they'd made
Yeah.
it in 20.
I mean, so would Christopher Plummer, actually, to be fair.
Yeah, that's true. That'd be confusing for.
Yeah. Joel Kinnaman.
Oh, yeah.
Who else? There's Jared Leto.
Yeah, get him to play Zelashenko.
He would do
Sweet.
an amazing job as well. I mean, he kind of plays a bleach blonde haired person who gets punched in the face a lot in Fight Club as well.
Yeah,
So
that's
there's no
true.
reason he couldn't play Needham.
That's true. Do you want to do your continue the franchise first, or should I do mine first?
Yeah, okay, I'll do mine.
Sweet.
All right, my continue the franchise is
My Perfect Sunday.
it's one of those ones where it's like, I don't know. It's already been done. I mean, essentially, I think you should adapt the Tridge as a TV miniseries of 3 seasons, each consisting of a few episodes. Which I know the original trilogy was re-edited to fit. But I mean, this could be bring back Rooney Mara, Daniel Craig to be in it, or fan casting. I was thinking like Elizabeth Olsen, I think, could do it quite well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And whereas for Mikhail, I think that's a bit more flexible. Well, I mean, do you want to throw out a name like of someone who else could play Mikhail?
Well, after First Reformed, I'm like, give me some Ethan Hawke as Mikhail.
Oh my god, yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes,
And Amanda
why didn't I think of
Seyfried
that?
as Lisbeth. Amanda Seyfried as Lisbeth.
That's
like the
real
First
good.
Reformed.
That would have worked.
Yeah.
Oh my god,
Yeah.
yes. So Ethan Hawke as Mikhail, that's amazing. And yeah, Elizabeth
The
Olsen.
challenge, the fun challenge for like makeup and costuming would be make Amanda Seyfried not adorable.
yeah.
You know?
And I think she would probably like playing the role as well because she's
Yeah,
typecast
exactly.
as being adorable. Yeah, so do it as a miniseries. Now, my rules for it.
Okay.
One thing we haven't talked about yet really is the score of Finch's version by Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor. Their scores are always fucking amazing, and they suit the tone so perfectly. So they have to do the score. I think it should be written by Gillian Flynn,
Who's that?
Huh?
Who's that? Sorry.
Oh, so she is the writer of the novel Gone Girl, and she's wrote the movie.
Right.
She also wrote Widows, the movie.
Yeah.
And she was also working on an adaptation of Strangers on a Train, the Hitchcock movie, to be directed by David Fincher. Although that's one of those up in the air projects. So I think she's great at doing adaptations because both Gone Girl and Widows, the films, were adaptations. And also having a female writer. I think, and also ideally, Patty Jenkins would direct this series.
I'm loving it, man. I love Patty Jenkins.
And because I think you look at something like, you look at the combination of Wonder Woman and Monster, and I think that
she has experience directing TV as well.
Yeah. I think that Lisbeth, especially after watching The Girl in the Spider's Web, here I go, getting back on my horse. Lisbeth, the character, shouldn't be written or directed by a man in film, anyway.
Okay.
And I mean, I guess like Spider's Web kind of speaks to this, even the novel, from what I understand. That like, Stieg Larsson maybe was like an exception kind of thing. But yeah, I think the character of Lisbeth would be very interesting directed by someone like Patty Jenkins. And you look at Monster, which is about like, a rape
Similar
survivor
themes,
and there's someone who sort of takes the law into their own hands when exacting revenge for it. And Gillian Flynn, again, a female voice who, you look at Gone Girl, similar kind of thing. A woman who is wronged or believes she's wronged at least, and then exacts revenge in her own way. Yeah. And yeah, that's my continued franchise. I also think that the 5-act structure of this lends itself really well. And the other thing, and I mentioned earlier that I disagreed with you and I'd address it in this, I thought that in Hornet's Nest, I kind of wish the court case had been a bigger part of it. I would love if Hornet's Nest, and I mean, it kind of would be a drastic, dramatic shift for the series, but I would love if so the first one's kind of like a There's like a detective story. The second one's like a cat and mouse, and then the third one was a courtroom drama.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
But then you could kind of explore that more in a mini series where even if just one episode is devoted to the courtroom drama.
I should actually clarify, the courtroom stuff was my favourite part.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Hornet's Nest. That was awesome. It was more the leading up to that. I was like, this is easily the worst one. And then the courtroom stuff started happening. And the reason why I defined it as being the courtroom one is because it's my favourite part. So it's the only part I remember from it.
But yes, that's my continuing franchise. It's another adaptation, and it has the potential to be the best one, I think, with the talent that I've chosen.
Nice.
And also, actually, Ethan Hawke in his breaking down his iconic roles said that he loves being directed by women and he feels he doesn't do it enough. So there you go.
All right. So my continuing the franchise is this is an idea I've had before, and it's so familiar. I feel like I was like, have I mentioned this to Richard before? And then as we were starting recording, I was like, fuck, I might have mentioned this on the podcast like at some point. So my idea is
it's just the TV show Everybody Loves Raymond.
Yeah. No, it's not. Everybody Loves Lisbeth.
Sorry to interrupt.
Not every family would go past on a conveyor belt for you, but mine would, because everybody loves Lisbeth.
Everybody loves Lisbeth. Sorry to interrupt your title reveal. I know that's your favorite part.
No, it's not a title reveal at all. It's it's just the girl on the spider's web, but it's as a video game. Because have you ever played Heavy Rain?
Yeah, man.
This girl on the spider's web is a movie version of the, maybe not plot, but structure of Heavy Rain. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where it's like, this seems real obvious. Like, it's almost like they couldn't make the game, and so they made a movie.
Instead.
So because it's a puzzle. So Heavy Rain, if you haven't played it, it's a puzzle-based thriller. Where
it's basically an interactive movie.
Yeah, where you play as multiple characters. And that part's important because in The Girl in the Spider's Web, you play, in quotation, as Lisbeth, Mikhail, and Needham, who's Lakeith Steinfeld's character. They have such distinctly separated storylines that converge together for so much of that film that I was like, this is Heavy Rain. This is That's
really interesting. And when I said that Lakeith kind of feels out of place, I think that's kind of what I felt. Like, that's articulated what I felt, is that it does feel like you're playing as a different character.
Yes.
Because he has different motivations. His mission feels very different, but partly because it takes place in America to begin with.
Yeah.
But it's like that chapter in Last of Us where you just start playing as Ellie.
Speaking of which, maybe you play as the kid that they're rescuing at the end.
Yeah.
Like the second to last level, you have to play as the kid. And this might be a bit tedious for those who haven't seen The Girl on the Spider's Web, but the final showdown in the house does a really great job, something this movie does well, of giving every character something to do. And I figure if you switch between characters and storylines like you do in GTA 5, and eventually you'd get to the point like you play all the available chapters of Lisbeth, and then you have to play Needham, but you can switch between them and get to like certain checkpoints where you can continue playing as them. There's a part in the final showdown where, for example, if this was a game version of the movie, you have to figure out, who do I need to play as to get everyone out of trouble? And so what you need to do is you need to play as Needham, who's got a sniper outside the house. And with the sniper, you need to shoot the bad guy guarding Mikhail. So now you switch over to Mikhail and you get up and run to Lisbeth, who's suffocating in that plastic bodysuit, and set her free so that you can then play as Lisbeth and chase after the bad guy. You know what I mean? So
that's really cool.
in your head, you're like, how do I solve? The puzzle is Lisbeth's dying, Mikhail is held hostage.
Being guarded, yeah.
The only character I can really do anything with is Needham. What do I do? You know? This is
it's
what
not
I
a very
mean.
hard puzzle, but yeah.
Yeah, sure. But it still puts it on you to figure it out, I guess. So that's that. You know what I mean? This is what I'm saying. Like, it feels like I stumbled onto a conspiracy, because that's that scene specifically is built so much like a character swapping video game that it just seemed like an obvious thing. So that's
and
my
it's interesting. And for the record, you've never mentioned the girl in the spider's web resembling Heavy Rain on the podcast before.
Okay, good.
Or to me.
Yeah. Do you agree, though? Like, it specifically Heavy Rain. I feel like you need to know what Heavy Rain, like, listeners need to know what Heavy Rain is.
Yeah, Heavy Rain's a very, very interesting game. It's a very specific style of game where you're kind of forced to
live out mundanities of life.
Basically, if you know gaming, you'll be familiar with QuickTime events.
Yeah.
Which are when you've got a game that you play out one way, but then it's basically a cutscene, but you have to just hold X to move out of the way. The whole game is that.
Yeah, but it's not
It's better than it sounds, because you get invested in the story.
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with Heavy Rain. Some of it I think is really good, and some of it I think is astonishingly bad. So, and I mean, that's similar to the girl in Spider's Web. So yeah, I don't know. That's my continue the franchise.
Yeah, and also it would lend itself really well to dialogue choices in that final showdown we mentioned earlier, where you could make it not have the victim blaming ending.
Yeah, and if it's people like, it's not as good as the Fincher movie. Who gives
a game.
It's a game, you fucking asshole. Sweet. All right. Well, Richard, that about brings us to the end of the episode, but we've got one more segment, and that's Ask Everyone 2019. So this is a new segment we keep forgetting to include, but then remember at the last second. And this is where we're going to tweet someone who was involved in at least one of these films and ask if they'd be keen for an interview on the show. As I've said twice now, the reason we do this publicly is because it's less lame if people are scouring our Twitter and see we're just tweeting random people and not getting any replies. Twitter's weird because you have to publicly do things you'd otherwise do in an email. Things like this. So today we're going to reach out to Trish Somerville, and she was the costume designer on Fincher's Dragon Tattoo film, so pretty cool aspect of that film, obviously, the costume design. And while she hasn't directly worked on any other films we've covered on film franchise Fortnights, her work is likely to show up again because she also did costume design for The Hunger Games Catching Fire and Leprechaun 3.
Okay, cool.
So, we'll probably see her again. Some of her other credits also include Red Sparrow, Velvet Buzzsaw, Gone Girl, The Dark Tower, Boy Erased, and she's attached to World War Z too, but...
Well, so obviously Fincher likes her because
exactly.
she's on Gone Girl as well.
So I'm going to tweet her. I've said, I've got the tweet prepared, and it says, hey, enter username. I don't want to say her Twitter handle. Or maybe should I say her Twitter handle?
I guess.
I've said, hey Trish, we run a movie podcast out of New Zealand, and we're big fans of your work as a costume designer. Would you be potentially up for an interview over Skype? #AskEveryone 2019.
Yeah. Cool. So and good on you for not being put off by the fact that she hasn't tweeted in 4 years.
Yeah, why would I be? All right, tweeted. And that about brings us to the end of the show. But we got to tell people what our next franchise is, Richard. And this fortnight was a Patreon pick, Patreon vote. We put it to our $1 patrons on patreon.com/cultpopshow. We say, hey, what franchise should we watch? And the one with the most votes wins. And he's done it, Richard. He's bloody done it.
Yep.
If you've been following the podcast the last few weeks, one of our patrons by the name of Ben Close has been campaigning for this, for us to be able to cover... Have you got it open just to confirm? I'm 100% sure it is.
Yeah, it won by quite a considerable margin, but I will pull it up.
Yeah, so we're going to be watching a 2-film franchise, which we thought people didn't want, so we took them off the list. But here it is. The next fortnight we're going to be covering Big Fat Liar and Bigger Fatter Liar. Yes, There's a sequel to Big Fat Liar.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think it'll be a very good episode, but...
So don't listen to it. Let's campaign to make this our least listened to episode.
I think this actually might be the most votes we've ever gotten for a franchise, even more than Lord of the Rings, which surprised us with how many votes it got.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean... Here we go, Big Fat Liar.
Let's actually
I'm going to make the episode deliberately terrible just to spite you, Ben.
Yeah, let's make this the worst episode our show has ever done. Sweet as. All right.
Yeah, or should we be the big fat liars and actually watch a different franchise?
Oh, shit.
No, I wouldn't do it to you. Okay.
Find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, SoundCloud, iTunes. Did I say YouTube? Yeah, I did.
And iTunes.
And
iTunes. Don't forget YouTube.
And Cult Popture. We're at Cult Popture on everything unless you want to email us, and please do. And that's cultpopturemedia@gmail.com. Please leave your thoughts about this episode in the comments below on whatever you're watching this. And rate and review us on iTunes, because we have a real... I'm going to post this on Instagram at some point. We got one review on iTunes, and iTunes reviews are relatively anonymous, so I don't know who posted it. But it's real fucking funny. And so I'm gonna post it on our Instagram at some point.
So...
and yeah, thank you very much for listening, guys. Hope you enjoyed it.
Yep, and have a good time.
Bye.
Bye.